we had this management team meeting, and I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't really know how that was supposed to go. It was awesome. It was just great. And the thing that was remarkable to them was as I shared story after story and person after person that we already have in this church, like already, like where we're at right now, with the skill sets we have, the people that we have, the knowledge that we have, they were blown away. Like they were like, that's crazy. In fact, one of the guys, he's a project manager for about 100 other plant churches. And he stopped me at one point. He said, don't tell your friends about some of this. They will hate you. He's like, they'll hate what you've already got going on because you guys, like, you have so many great pieces together. So I got this email afterwards from Dave, this guy who worked with us in Washington. He's a consultant, like I said, for Willow Creek Association and for the Global Leadership Summit. He sent me this email afterwards. I just want to read it to you. It was super encouraging to me and just really powerful. He said, thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the management team. Today's call was a spiritual experience for me because of the undeniable activity of God. I was moved to write a note to the launch team. If there is an appropriate time to read it as an affirmation and encouragement to them, go for it. And this is that time, okay? So it's going to happen right now. And he says nice things about, okay, yeah, here we go. So, dear Restoration partners, Tuesday afternoon, I was on a video call learning about Restoration Church. It was a moment where I undeniably saw God. Story after story about you, the Restoration Church, was shared, and you are clearly an incredible group of people. A group that brings an amazing skill set, a group that is clearly interested in restoration thriving, a group that doesn't just talk about investing in the community, but a group that actually invests in the community. My hope is that you see God as you look around the room. This caliber of people, this set of skills, this level of commitment doesn't just happen. It is a clear expression of God's activity. Soak in this moment. Soak in the reality that you are in the midst of a powerful work of God. Indulge in the assurance that you are part of something that is impacting lives. Keep up the incredible work. You are breaking the mold, not just on what it looks like to start a church, but also what it looks like to be a church. It's powerful, isn't it? And I love that he says, like, he's excited about what's going on, but he says, soak in this moment. Because, guys, I mean, let's face it, we're really busy right now. There's a lot going on. He's like, no, just stop for just a second. And it's been a short history, but look at where you've already been and soak in the moment that you're in right now. Just take a second, breathe, and be grateful for where you're at. And, like, we have to do that every once in a while, don't we? And as we're in the middle of that moment, we have like this sweet moment. I remember talking with a good friend of mine, and I remember he was talking about a church that he was a part of, and he said afterwards, after he'd left that church and he moved on, he said, we didn't realize what a sweet moment we were in at that time. We didn't realize till it was almost too late. And so today I want to look at, if you've been around here for a little while, you know we're doing this grassroots gospel series. We're walking through the book of Acts, and we've been kind of going straight through it. Now, this series is actually going to end. I know. We've been doing this for a long time, but actually it's only got a couple more weeks. And so we have 2 more weeks to try to wrap up the entire book of Acts. So today we're going to cover at least 11 chapters. Just hang in there for the next 3.5 hours, and we'll be done, okay? So, we're just gonna look at Acts chapter 16 and look at a story there. But there's this sweet moment that happens there. There's this moment that's very powerful, in this moment that really is a beautiful moment. And it's just them sitting. It's this moment of a sweet moment. It says this in Acts chapter 16, verse 25. It says, about midnight, Paul and Silas, 2 of these apostles, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. Now that's beautiful, isn't it? That's like an awesome moment. Now, I don't know what you picture in that moment. I don't know if you're like me, like if you picture like when I was in college, we would stay up till midnight singing worship songs, and we knew like 3 chords and 4 songs, and we would just play those 3 chords and those 4 songs over and over again. There was a lot of Lord, I Lift Your Name on High. We did a lot of that one. It only had 3 chords, and we were really good at that one. And we did a lot of that, and it would go right into that Waves of Mercy one. If you grew up in the church, you might know the songs I'm talking about. That one was the worst song I've ever heard. I mean, really, it was the worst theological song I've ever heard in my life. Anyways, yeah, waves of mercy, waves of grace. Everywhere I look, I see your face. Means nothing. And there's no verse that comes from, in case you're wondering. Okay? And then we go into that holiness. Holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. By the way, there was a while where I really thought there was a verse called cleanliness. Cleanliness is what I long for. I don't know why I really thought that was a verse. I think I even led it in a couple churches at one point. I'm sure they were like, what? What's this guy and his OCD? Why is everything got to be clean? Anyways, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But just the worship that happens. There are times where that's a really beautiful thing when you sit in that moment, right? Now, I've been a part of churches for a long time, and I grew up in it, and if you didn't, that's great. And actually, I kind of envy you for this. Because there's some things that we get used to in production of worship in churches. It's just the way things work. And sometimes we kind of miss the point of what worship really looks like. I've seen probably more mishaps than I should have in worship. There was one time, some of you guys met my friend Nick last week, who was here helping us out with tech. And Nick was he was my tech guy in Washington, and we were at this big church in Washington. And we would use tracks. So we would use these click tracks in our ears for the whole band to keep us together. And then we also had these tracks of like the other instruments playing our parts in case we were bad enough that we couldn't play our parts. So they would just like fade in this fake track of somebody else playing that over top of us, right? And it was for emergencies, or if like a bass player got sick, we could just fill in that bass line, whatever it was. And we would use those. Now, Nick was my tech guy. He had set up these fantastic cameras all over. We had these 3 screens. Everything we did was on the screens, and you could see everything we did. They were on these massive screens. And there was this one service where our keyboard stopped working. And it just wasn't working. And the countdown clock's already on, and everybody's filing into the room. It's our 11 o'clock service, and at that service, we would have about 1,000 people in the room at least. And so we have all these people filtering into the room. The countdown clock's going, and the keys aren't working. And my keys player looks at me. She's like, I don't know what's happening. And she's kind of like way up front, right under one of the lights. And she's like, I don't know what's happening. So I was like, well, just grab your microphone, okay? And she was singing some harmonies. So just come over here, stand by me, and I'll get Nick to come. He's going to come fix your keyboard. So he runs down, like a tech guy does. He runs down, he goes to the keyboard. Now the song, if you know this song, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a song called 10,000 Reasons. And it has this beautiful piano line, just beautiful piano line. Which is hard to do when you don't have keys that work, like when your keyboard's not working, right? So Nick goes to the keyboard, and he's like trying to figure everything out. And he's like messing with computers, he's messing with all these different things, he's hitting all these buttons. And there's this spot where there's a piano solo where it takes off. And the cameraman knew we zoom in on the piano for the piano solo. And Nick's messing with all these things. And the piano solo comes up, and I look over, and bless his heart, Nick has not a musical bone in his body. And so I look over, and all of a sudden he knows the piano solo comes up, and he sees himself on the screens, and he just goes. And the person in the back fades in the piano solo on the tracks. And you hear this beautiful piano solo, and you see Nick going like this. and then he gets real nervous, and he realizes what's happening. And then, right at the end of the piano solo, he just walks off the stage. He just leaves. He just walks, and somehow it's still happening. It was magical. I've seen a lot of mishaps of worship. There's a lot of times where it goes horribly wrong, but there's some times where it goes incredibly right? And there's moments in worship, if you're not familiar with what worship is, there's moments in it that are just so powerful. There's sweet moments that happen. I've seen life change happen because of worship. I've seen people who are going through amazingly difficult times find resolution through worship. See, worship, if you're not familiar with that word, what that word means, we use it all the time. It gets thrown around all the time. It almost has no meaning anymore. But worship, what it means, the meaning of the word, it comes from 2 words, worth and ship. So it's worth-ship. And ship means to show worth, right? That's what worship is. It's showing God's worth. When we worship him, we show his worth. We proclaim his worth, right? That's what we're doing. And so that's what worship really is. And this beautiful moment that's happening of worship is just so powerful. There's something amazing happening. And I think that we sometimes miss the boat on that. We miss how powerful that can be. And so I want to back up in this story in Acts chapter 16 and look at how Paul and Silas got to this place of worship. And I'll begin with verse 16, and we'll kind of walk through this. Now, I'm going to warn you, it's weird. It gets weird. There's some weird things, okay? There's some things in the Bible that you just have to be like, that's really odd. And I'm not going to skirt over it or pretend like it didn't happen. It's just weird. It was a different culture, different day, and different things were happening, but it is weird. Okay. So it says this, once when we were going to the place of prayer. Now here's the thing. We, okay, that's a weird thing in where we're at right now. We is Luke, who's writing this book. This is the first time he's actually on a journey with these people. He's been writing this in third person, right? Like, so the disciples did this, and the church did this, and people did that. He was talking about it in third person. This is the first time he's there. So he's saying, we did this now, okay? So we were going to the place of prayer, and we were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. See? I told you it was going to get weird. And she has this spirit, and this is a kind of a cool thing, just as a total side note. One of the cool things, this is a place of prayer. A place of prayer would have been a place that's completely constructed of women. There, at the time, to have an official service, an official synagogue is what they call it, but official service of the church, you had to have 10 men. You had to have a quorum to do that, and it had to be 10 men. So this is a place where only women are. Okay? And it's kind of cool because Paul and Silas don't see that as a negative thing. They don't see it where their culture does. They see this as an opportunity still. And they go towards this opportunity. And they meet this female slave who has a spirit by which she predicted the future. So it's like this Dionne Warwick situation of the Psychic Network. And she earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. That's what her job was. She would tell the future. She followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved." Right? So she's predicting, she's fortune telling. I don't know if you know this or not, but there is a psychic group that meets in this room every month, I think. There's a group that meets in here. And we've kind of wondered when the meeting center asks them how many chairs they need set up, like if they know an exact amount. Because like it shouldn't be like a guess if you're in the Psychic Network, you know. That's my opinion. It should be like, no, I know exactly how many people are going to be there tonight. I can tell you right now. So anyways, so she's predicting they're going to tell you the way to be saved. Now that sounds good, right? She's following them around. This is Paul and Silas. They're going to tell you the way to be saved. They're going to tell you about it. That sounds good. She kept this up for many days. And finally, Paul became so annoyed that he turned around and said to the spirit, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." And at that moment, the spirit left her. Which, I mean, I love that he gets so annoyed that he does like a miracle, right? Like he's like, fine, I'll just cast a demon out of you, you know, if I have to. It's a weird moment, isn't it? The whole thing's odd. But he calls this thing out of her. Now, it's weird because why would he want to do that? She's just saying that they're coming to tell you about this new life in Jesus. And that sounds easy, but he's trying to differentiate the two. He's saying, no, she's got a spirit that's different than the spirit we have. You know, and there's a difference in that. Sometimes I think we do get a little bit too easy with, and I'm not saying there's not other good things out there, but we get a little too easy with other religions, other things where it's like they're all the same, and it's not. And he's saying it's not the same. She's got a different spirit inside of her than what we're trying to bring to the table. And so what we'd like to do is we need to get this one out of there so there's no confusion for people where they're like, so he's with her? Is she part of their group? What's going on? So he gets annoyed and he casts the demon out of her. Really exciting time. Man, I would love, there's moments where it's like, I just imagine it like our kids, like when I just snap, you know, or it's like, you know, and I'm like, child, come out of that demon. It's the other way around that way. But then when her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, this is where the real turmoil is. That story is it's just a piece of this. Here's the real turmoil. When her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said, "These men are Jews and are throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept or practice." See, now, it's amazing, isn't it? They just set somebody free. Isn't it interesting sometimes when you find freedom that sometimes people don't want you to have that? Like, there are some people who don't want you to have that freedom. There are some people who want to keep a thumb on you. They want to hold you down. It's just the way it works. And sometimes we're that person if we're honest with ourselves. But you would think that this miracle would be like, that's awesome. Good for her. But instead, they want to keep her in these chains, in this bondage of having this spirit inside of her. So they take her because they don't have an income anymore, and they take her to the chief officials, and they're like, you know, he set her free, but we're not making money anymore. Which is a sad place to be. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in our world today still. I mean, this is completely a side note, but it still happens to this day. There are still children, there are still people who are forced into things all over our world, and not even just in our world, but in our own country, of sex trades, of slavery. It happens. And let me tell you, they're not happy when those people are set free. This person's been set free. You'd think that would be an awesome moment. So she's set free. The owners take her in and say, this isn't okay. They take Paul and Silas to the chief magistrate and some of these authorities. The crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and then the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. After they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. When he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. Okay, so what's happening there, okay, they're saying you need to watch these guys, because if you remember, there's been a few other jailbreaks with these Christian people. So we need to make sure we're pretty careful this time. He's like, watch it, and he knows, and this jailer knows how important this job is. So he takes them and he puts them in the inner cell. Now, the inner cell is the middle of the jail. This is all by lighting outside, right? So all the lights that come inside, that would be showing basically what we have right now, sunlight. That would be the lights for the building. But suddenly, if you're in that inner cell, it's the darkest spot in the building. It's right in the middle. There's no windows to the outside. Your windows are to your neighbors. Your windows are to the people around you, but you're on the inside of the entire thing, right? And they're put in this incredibly, not just a physical dark place, but they're put in an emotionally dark place. They've been beaten. They're in pain. They've been put in prison. They're in this dark place. Now, some of those things I don't know if you can relate to or if I can relate to. Some of those things I don't understand. When I was in college, our college was doing all this construction at one point. And they had all these, what are those things called? Like the big boxes you put on the back of like a freight train. You put them on shipping cargo. Those big like Maersk, is that how you say that word? Freight boxes. You know what I'm talking about? Like they're back on the back of railroad cars. They had those all over our campus storing stuff, like all over the place. And they were putting them down on the ground and they would store things in there. And one of my friends, she had this little car. It was called a Geo Metro. And it was like a pregnant roller skate. Like I don't know if you've ever seen these things. It was the smallest car I've ever seen. And I thought I had this idea at one point, and I took her keys while she was in a class, and I pulled her car into one of those because I thought, I wonder if it'll fit. And there was an empty one, and I drove the car right into this big box. I put it right in there. And then I closed it up, and I left it in there and went away. And I thought it was kind of a funny joke. It took her a while to find it. She was looking all over campus, and she got to the point where she thought somebody stole her car. And it was a really funny joke until the police showed up. And then it wasn't as funny anymore, where I had to be like, hey guys, thanks for coming to campus today. I have the keys. I'm not a thief. I'm just a really funny jokester. Yeah, it didn't go great. That wasn't my best idea. And the police were not amused at all. But I had to go pull her car out of the little box and be like, sorry, but it does fit in there in case you're ever wondering, if you ever need to ship it. Now that's, again, I can't say I've never been close to being thrown in prison. Like I've really not been that close. That was probably one of the closest brushes I've had. So maybe you're like me and you can't really relate to prison. But I think we can all relate to pain. These guys are in pain. They've been beaten. They've been put in jail. They're in the darkest place of their lives. I think we can all relate to pain. I think we like to play this like comparison game of pain. Where it's like, who's been through the most pain? Right? Like, who has the biggest scars? And that's fine. I know some people have way bigger hurts than others in some way or another, but I don't know that really that's an accurate game. I don't think we can play that game because the only pain you know is the pain you've experienced. I don't think there's anybody on our planet who has not experienced some form of pain. And secondly, I don't think there's somebody on our planet who has not experienced all the pain they can stand at some point in their life. See, I believe everybody hits 100% of pain at some point in their life. There's a point where you get to 100%. You're like, this is as far as I can go. This is as much as I can take. I think everybody has been there at one point or another where you think, this is all I can take. This is all I can handle. This is 100% of the pain I can handle. Now, your 100% may look different than somebody else's 100%, But that doesn't mean that you're not all at 100%. We're all at 100%. We've all felt 100% of pain. We've all been there. And there's moments where you thought that was 100%, and then you realize there was another 100%, and your 100% got bigger. It got worse, but you're still at 100%. We think sometimes that things like this are too easy. Sometimes I think we think that, well, that person went through this, and so they must have a bigger scar. They must have more pain than I deal with. And there's truth to that. There's different repercussions of that, but at the same time, we can all identify with one another because we all have pain. Every single one of us has had pain. And there's something about pain that's really amazing. If we choose to remember that we have a choice in our pain, that we still have a God in our pain, and our God is still good, even in the midst of our pain. If we choose those things, we have a choice in this. And Paul and Silas are at the darkest place in their lives. And then we read this verse. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Now it's midnight in the darkest cell in a prison after being beaten. And what do they choose to do? They begin singing and praying. They sing hymns to God. See, Paul, it's great that Paul does this because Paul, if you're really going to be a person who practices what you preach, this is a good thing for Paul. Paul writes, he writes this in 1 Thessalonians 5. He writes this passage where he says, "Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ." Okay, that sounds really easy if things are going well. But notice Paul's not in something that's going well. He says, "Rejoice always, pray continually," which is what he's doing, "and in all circumstances give thanks." Notice what he doesn't say. He does not say give thanks for all circumstances. Give thanks in all circumstances. There's a big difference there. We don't give thanks for all circumstances because some of them aren't easy. Some of them are hard. But we give thanks in all circumstances. And they choose to worship, and they turn their place of pain into a place of praise, and that changes everything. See, when we begin to worship, when we show God his worth, when we begin to worship and we do this worthship, see, it doesn't just show God what he's worth, but it reminds us of what we're worth. Because when we worship God, we remember we're created in his image. And the God of the universe cares intimately for us. And that he has been faithful time and time again. And he's still good. Our circumstances may not be good, but our God is still good. That's what worship does. It reminds us not just of his worth, but it reminds us of our worth in him. And so they choose to do that. They make a choice, a conscious effort. And at midnight, the darkest time, in the middle of the prison, they start singing, and the other prisoners hear them. They're in the middle. They're in a room where suddenly the other prisoners can hear them because they're placed in the middle of all of them. The other prisoners were listening. And suddenly, there was a violent earthquake, and that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once, all the prison doors flew open, and everyone's chains came loose. So suddenly they're worshiping, and it's not just like there was a lock picked. The entire prison crumbled. The entire thing came down. The foundations were shaken, and the whole thing came down. It all fell. And notice that it wasn't just Paul and Silas who were released. They were all released. They all had found freedom. And so they're all released. And you would think, if you're like me, you would think everybody would run away. You would be out of there as fast as you could. But it says this, the jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword. He was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself. We are all here." Seriously, why wouldn't you leave? Like, why wouldn't you go somewhere else? And it's not just Paul and Silas. Those are the disciples. Those are the good guys, right? Of course, so they maybe would stay put because they're good. But all the prisoners stayed. We may have like murderers. We may have like terrible people, the thieves, all this stuff that are in that room. You would think as soon as those walls came down, they would be gone. But when you turn your place of pain into a place of praise, you're not as eager to leave that place. No matter how hard that place is, no matter how difficult that place is, you're not quite in such a hurry.
All right.
Because God's meeting you where you are. You remember that your God's still good, that you're walking closer with him. I remember there was a time in our lives, Marie and I were going through just some really difficult things. We had some family members that were going through divorces. I had some family members who passed away. There were just things that were not going well. And it just started to pile up and pile up and pile up. And we had young children. We were trying to make ends meet for ourselves. There was a lot going on in our lives. There was just so much happening. And we were trying to get to all these family members, trying to care for all these people, trying to be everywhere. And there was a lot going on. And I remember my sister-in-law had this talk with my wife, and she said, there's this other verse that Paul, the same guy, he writes, and he says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And it totally changed our mindset to look for lovely things. To start looking for lovely things every day. And we did that. We started doing that. Every day at the end of the day, we would sit down and we would, before we went to bed, Marie made this, I'm sure it was off Pinterest. It was this picture frame situation. And she printed off this thing that went inside of the picture frame, and it said, my lovely things. And it had 3 things for each of us to write down. And we would write down on that picture frame with a dry erase marker what they were. And every day, if you train your mind to look for those things, they're there. They're there. There's actually great studies on that if you train your mind to look for good things, you'll find them. And your mind will become trained to look for good things. And these guys, they weren't so worried about leaving this place because they found some good things right in the midst of what they were going through, no matter how hard it was. And they stayed put. And I love that Paul says this. He says, we are all here. He's not distancing himself from prisoners. He's not saying hey, Silas and I and these other jokers, we're still here. All of us are here. He's not saying it that way. He's not saying hey, the bad guys and us, we're still here. No, we're all of us collectively are still here. That's a powerful word because he's identifying himself with them. He's putting himself in the group with them. We are all still here. They were not in a rush to leave. And notice what it does to this prison guard, to this jailer. The jailer called for lights because it was midnight. It was pitch black. He called for lights, which you can read your own metaphors in that right there, rushed in and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? Which is a great question. Now, this word doesn't mean it doesn't mean be saved if I were to pray a prayer right now, I would be saved. Save Ed, past tense, save Ed. It means, what must I do to begin being saved? We never really reach save Ed in this lifetime. We just don't get there. Save Ed is past tense. That means we've already been saved. This is a constant progression. It's a constant movement of just getting to know Jesus and continuing to be in relationship with him. So it's not like he's saying, what must I do to be save Ed? He's just saying, what must I do to begin this process, this relationship that you seem to have? Because here's the thing. This jailer, he's seen people locked up. He knows what prison looks like. He knows what pain looks like. And when he sees true freedom, he knows what that looks like too. And he's just seen what real freedom looks like. And so he says, how do I get that? How do I get to be a part of that? What must I do to be saved? And then they replied, believe. They didn't hand him a tract. There actually was no sinner's prayer. Those things didn't happen. And you'll never find it. So they didn't do those things. They just told them, they said, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all the others in his house. So they went to his house with them. They told the people in his house about it. And at that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. Then immediately he and all his household were baptized. That's powerful, isn't it? That he washed their wounds. Sometimes we think like the people who are new to Jesus, or we think people that are new to this faith thing, that they don't have the same heart that we do. They don't want to serve the way we do. That they don't understand human hurt the way we do. This guy gets it right off the bat. There's times where we have to realize that people who are in our community, they have as much to offer as anybody else to the kingdom. Just need to believe in Jesus. They have as much to offer the community as anybody else. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before them, and he was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. I think at the end of the day, the thing from that story that really hits me is I think there are moments where we get so caught up in pain and we miss the chance to worship in the midst of it. We miss the chance to make a place of pain into a place of praise. We miss the chance to remind ourselves that our God is still good and that he still loves us. And that it's not just that he has unbelievable worth. He is both great and he is good. But that because he loves us, it still gives us an identity in the middle of the pain. It still gives us a hope in the middle of the pain. We're not defined by our pain. We're not defined by our circumstances. We're defined by our God, who is still good, who still loves. And the thing is, when we see true freedom like that, when people experience that with us, the hope that I have is that it's just like this, where it's intoxicating. It's something other people want to be a part of. That jailer couldn't help himself. How do I have what you have? I see you going through difficult times, but the way you're responding to those times is something I've never seen before. How do I have what you have? How do I act like you act? How do I have the hope that you have? That's my hope as a community, is that we can do that. Not just people who live in freedom for ourselves. Paul and Silas could have just bailed as soon as it happened. They could have left everybody else behind, including the jailer, but they stayed put. And the hope that I have is when we find freedom, that it's intoxicating to other people, that they want that freedom, and that we stay put for them. We say, look what's happening. Even in the pain, even in the mess, even when we've been set free, we're still here with you. We want you to come with us. People will notice that. That's the kind of church we want to be. That's the kind of people we need to be. Not people who hoard the freedom for ourselves. People who give that away and invite other people into it. Let's stand together. We're going to pray and we're going to sing a song just to reflect on this. And this song, it speaks almost directly to what we just talked about breaking chains, about being set free, the power of Jesus to do that. So let's pray together. God, I thank you so much for today. I thank you for your word. Thank you so much for just the boldness of guys like Paul and Silas. I thank you for the stories that we get to read and that we get to learn from. And God, I pray that we be people who, as we walk through pain, as we walk through difficult times, we be people who still walk through those places of pain with an attitude of praise. We be people who walk through those places of pain, and we would invite other people into it. And as people walk alongside of us, as we find freedom, that we'd find freedom together, and that other people would just see that freedom and become a part of it. That we'd open the doors up to everyone else as well. God, I thank you for the freedom that you've shown us. I thank you for the ways that you've taken our pain and made it perfect. The way that you've taken our brokenness and you made it beautiful. God, the way that you ultimately are restoring us to you. You're restoring the people around us to you. You're restoring families to you, individuals to you. Thank you that we get to be a small part in that story. Pray today as we respond that you would show us what it is you would have us learn from this, that the areas in our lives that we need to apply this to. As we sing together, would you just speak to us? Praise, thanks your name.